So I'm playing Moon Alley by Tom Harrell. I want to look at this tune because it's a good example of a jazz tune, a jazz composition in more of a modern style. So as opposed to kind of the old American songbooks or a bebop tune, you have to treat this tune in a little bit of a different way. So we'll look at that, some ideas for comping as well as soloing. So first off, let's learn the tune. Let's get started, shall we? So this backing track is actually the Aebersold, the Tom Harrell Aebersold. It's on YouTube at this moment anyway, it is, so I'll put a link to it. So let's play the melody of Moon Alley by Tom Harrell.
1, 2, 3, 4.
F major 7, F minor, B flat, so that's another A section, right? B flat minor. If you're playing like a jazz standard, like an American songbook type tune, it's usually functional harmony. That means that all the chords have functions, tonic, subdominant, dominance, etc. So you have to kind of play in that tonality. The point is to kind of outline the harmony. I've talked about this a lot in my videos. You do that by playing the guide tones and playing the chord tones. You could treat this tune like that too. You could think arpeggios. You could look at this tune like a functional harmony type tune and say it's the tonic and then there's modal interchange. This is the 5 minor, I guess. This chord is hard to kind of give a function in this key, but... And I could play the guide tones, the 3rd and the 7th. Sounds kind of good, actually. So it's kind of a functional harmony tune, and it's kind of modal. It's kind of non-functional harmony, but it's not completely non-functional, and it's not completely modal. So I'm gonna look at it each chord is its own mode. I'm gonna look at it a little bit more modally. So this is gonna be a Lydian chord. Anytime there's a major 7 chord, I'm gonna think of that as a Lydian sound. You wanna be a little bit careful with that sharp 11, both in comping and in the soloing, because you don't wanna overdo it. But I'm still gonna look at this first chord, F major 7, as like that. Those are the notes from F Lydian. And then anytime there's a minor chord, I'm gonna think Dorian. I'm playing extended arpeggios. I'm playing 1, 3, 5, flat 7, 9, 11, 13. And for the major chords, it's gonna be 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, sharp 11, 13. All the notes of the Lydian scale. Let's do that actually.
1, 2, 3, 4.
The challenge here is voice leading. So going from mode to the next in the smoothest way. This is gonna be the thing that you need to practice if you haven't. So you need to know what the notes are of the next arpeggio. Some of the notes are same. Right? So in order to kind of develop the ability to do that, it's a good idea to kind of maybe practice one key change at a time. So you can go into iReal Pro and maybe practice just the first chord change, F major to F minor. So I'm just gonna try to here is the thing, you know, you learn your scales and arpeggios. Most jazz students will learn to play the scales, Lydian, and then Dorian. Let's say you get pretty good at that and you can maneuver your way through these changes. But all you're doing basically, or most of the time anyway, is to playing stepwise. Or if you're playing arpeggios, you're playing thirds. So I'm not saying you can't do that, but you're limited to those two intervals, basically. When you hear somebody who's kind of starting out playing jazz on a tune like this, that's what they will do. If they learn the scales and arpeggios, that's a lot of work already. But to get to the next step, you have to be able to play focusing on the larger intervals. So fourths, now we're getting into quartal harmony. So how do you do that? Well, first let's play the chords in more of a quartal structure. So I'm gonna play this voicing for the major sevens. I'm gonna keep it simple, just in kind of no inversions or anything here. But for the minor, I play this. So it's kind of like a stack of fourths. F, B flat, E flat, A flat. So I'll remove the chords in I will Pro, and let's do that. So that was an example of very basic kind of quartal harmony, and this is not anything new, right? Like McCoy Tyner and those guys, John Coltrane, they did this in the 60s at least. I forgot to mention also that when there's a 2-5 E flat minor to E flat minor over A flat to D flat, I'm not thinking of that as a 2-5 in the normal sense. I'm thinking modally, so I'm E flat minor 7 and A flat sus like that. It's kind of the same chord with just different bass notes, right? E flat minor, A flat sus. So I'm just looking at that and thinking E flat Dorian. Whatever I'm doing on the E flat, I will do it on the next chord as well, instead of thinking like 2-5-1 licks or anything like that. That would be more of a bebop approach. There is much more you can do with quartal harmony. You can add a note on top, you can stack more fourths, or you can put a third on top. So the interval on top is a third. If you're new to quartal harmony, it can be kind of overwhelming to learn the whole scale. So I'm going up the scale. Diatonically. So this is an F Lydian scale, starting with that chord and then harmonize the scale. What I like to do is I like to play the chords that surround the chord. So here, that is a good place to start. Instead of trying to play the whole harmonized scale for every chord, it might be a little bit too much in the beginning. So how do you solo with this approach? This was a mystery to me when I was trying to figure out how to play in a more quartal harmony. So we need to think about pentatonic scales. Because if you think about it, the guitar is tuned in fourths. There's a third here, but it's an E minor pentatonic scale, right? Do, 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 do. So if I play that over F, I'm playing a Lydian chord, maybe not the best voicing, but so the notes of the E minor scale, the E minor pentatonic scale, is a F Lydian sound. E minor pentatonic is the same as G major pentatonic. I tend to think of them as minor pentatonics because I'm a guitar player. We learn the minor pentatonic. That's the first scale we learn, I think, most of us. But if you think about an F Lydian, if I play the F major pentatonic scale, those notes belong to the F Lydian scale, but we don't get the Lydian sound. If I go up a fifth from here, play C major pentatonic scale, I get the major 7. And if I go up a fifth from there, I get a G major pentatonic. Now we get a Lydian that Lydian note. But as I said, I think of that as E minor. I transpose that to E minor. So every time I see a major 7 chord, I'm gonna play a minor pentatonic a half step down from that root. So I have an F major 7 Lydian chord, E minor pentatonic. And when I get to F minor, in order to get the Dorian sound, the most out of it, the pentatonic that I'm gonna pick is a whole step up, so G minor pentatonic. The best book for this kind of stuff is Pentatonics by Jared Bergonzi, which is a book that I've talked about in previous lessons. So pentatonics will give you that quartal sound, but there is always a third somewhere in there, pentatonic. They're not all fourths. Here's the third, fourth, fourth. Just like in the tuning of the guitar, there is a third in there somewhere. If you listen to the recording, which you should obviously, the original recording of this tune, it's a great album and a great player. So I think it's Kenny Garrett on there. The way they are soloing over this tune is they use a lot of this stuff, the pentatonics. It's a very good example of that kind of pentatonic playing. So let's just try that. Let's try some of these pentatonic scales. So G major or E minor pentatonic. G minor. C minor. F minor. So I'm overdoing it a little bit. If you, as I said before, you want to be a little bit careful with that sharp 11, because if you play it all the time, it sounds like you're just learned the Lydian sound. You know, it's like with everything else. You want to save the good stuff and don't just give it away all the time. And so the other pentatonics, of course, are also useful, but it's just that I'm picking the ones that give us that most Lydian or Dorian sound and practicing those. I should also mention that, of course, we're just looking at the harmony here. If you listen to modern jazz players, and I mean like the contemporary jazz players, like the Mike Marino and Kurt Rosenwinkel of the world, they're doing much more complex stuff. And if they would even play a tune like this, they would do something with the timing, and it's oftentimes why it sounds different than earlier jazz is because they've kind of expanded the rhythmic ideas and they do complex rhythmic things. We're not talking about that today. We're just looking at some basic stuff for more modern playing. They also might be doing, you know, like free form ideas. They might be doing sections that are completely free form or something like that, or different pulses going on at the same time or stuff like that. Also, of course, the sound, it's different when you listen to someone like Kurt Rosenwinkel. He has a modern sound and they use synths and stuff like that. It's not just that you play Quartal Harmony and all of a sudden you're playing modern jazz. That's not what I'm saying. But the larger intervals is what we're aiming for here. So I'll show you a few more ideas for playing larger intervals. One is to play fifths, because remember, a fifth is a inversion of a fourth. It's the same thing, just depending on where you look at it. So that's the fourth, that's the fifth, same two notes. So we can play fifths, and some licks for that. One is one of my favorites. I got it from Scott Henderson. For the major chord, so I'm playing a fifth and another fifth. Go up a step, like a whole step, and then a fifth. And for the minor chords, I go up half step. I think it's also something that Joe Satriani, there's some tune where he plays like this, but I think he plays like that with tapping or something crazy like that, but this I got from Scott Henderson. So let's just play that over the tune, like a little exercise. Here's another little large interval lick that I've shown before. I think it's a Kreisberg thing. It could be Mike Marino, but I think I saw Jonathan Kreisberg play this. So same thing, fifths. Then I play the third. And then the seventh. So those are fifths. And then I do this. For minor. It's a really good technique exercise. So let's play that one. Something I forgot to mention there is like when you go from that F minor pentatonic that you work over the E flat minor chord to the E minor pentatonic over the F Lydian chord, that's a half step below. That's called side slipping. I think it's called side slipping. Again, there's this idea of voice leading that I need to find a smooth way to do that. So it doesn't sound like this. But rather, so if you can go back and forth between those pentatonics without sounding like you're actually moving your hand just to another position, if you know what I mean, like you find a way to make it more elegant. That's the challenge here. So those were some ideas for a little bit more of a modern approach to a jazz tune. And an example of a tune that is a little bit more modern than the typical jazz standards. And I should mention that it's not that I have anything against earlier jazz or bebop. You know my channel, you know that I love early jazz, I love bebop, but the stuff that I normally talk about, bop scales and arpeggios and stuff like that, I wouldn't do that over a tune like this. I have a different approach, as I have shown here. Then what some players do is that they take this kind of approach when they play a tune like Stella by Starlight and think modally, right? So that's how you can kind of make those jazz standards sound a little bit more modern. But I recommend learning tunes like this first. So that was Moon Alley and modern jazz playing. I hope you enjoyed that, and I want to thank you for your time and attention. I shall see you next time.